Imagine a frozen empire 3 times the size of Texas. Beneath its icy surface lies the largest unexplored petroleum reserve on Earth. 90 billion barrels of oil, 1,700 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Rare earth minerals worth trillions. This is Canada's Arctic, and right now, in January 2026, it's slipping through Canada's fingers while the world watches. This isn't ancient history. This is happening today. 3 days ago, President Donald Trump publicly attacked Canada's Prime Minister by name. American officials are meeting with Alberta separatists who want to split Canada apart. Chinese icebreakers are prowling international waters just beyond Alaska. Russian nuclear submarines patrol beneath the Arctic ice. And Canada? Canada has aging jets, a handful of patrol ships, and promises. Lots of promises. Let me take you to the top of the world, where the temperature is rising faster than anywhere else on the planet, and with it, the stakes for global dominance. Because as the ice melts, something extraordinary is happening. Ancient shipping routes frozen for 10,000 years are opening. Resources buried under impenetrable permafrost are becoming accessible. And the world's superpowers aren't asking permission anymore. The Arctic holds approximately 13% of all undiscovered oil on Earth. Canada's share of the Arctic? A staggering 8.4 billion barrels of oil. That's 20% of the Arctic's undiscovered oil reserves. We're talking about resources worth more than the GDP of most countries. Oil, natural gas, lithium, cobalt. Rare earth elements. The building blocks of batteries, smartphones, fighter jets, and the green energy revolution everyone's talking about. But here's the problem. While Canada claims ownership of this frozen treasure chest, it cannot defend it, and everyone knows it. Picture Canada's Arctic defense capabilities like this. You're trying to guard a mansion the size of several European countries with one security guard who shows up twice a year in an old pickup truck. That's Canada's position. They have CF-18 fighter jets designed in the 1970s, a handful of coastal patrol ships that can't break through thick ice, and the Canadian Rangers, a reserve force equipped with bolt-action rifles designed in 1895. I'm not making this up. Now compare that to Russia. Russia operates over 40 icebreakers in the Arctic. 40. Canada is planning maybe 10 by the end of this decade, and most of them are still just blueprints. Russia has reopened Cold War military bases across the entire Arctic frontier. They've planted their flag on the ocean floor beneath the North Pole in a symbolic claim. They send nuclear-capable bombers on patrol missions that Canadian and American forces scramble to intercept. Russia's first armed combat icebreaker, the Ivan Papanin, just joined their northern fleet. They have 17 deep-water Arctic ports. Canada has 0. And then there's China. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state, despite being nowhere near the Arctic Circle. They've invested billions in Greenland's infrastructure and mining operations. They're building their 4th polar-capable research vessel. Their stated goal? Creating a polar Silk Road across the Arctic Ocean. In 2025, the U.S. Coast Guard shadowed 2 Chinese research vessels operating in international waters just beyond Alaska. Legal? Yes. Innocent? Absolutely not. They're mapping the seabed, gathering data, testing boundaries. But the most dangerous threat to Canadian sovereignty doesn't come from Russia or China. It comes from Canada's closest ally, the United States of America. For decades, Canada and the U.S. have disagreed about who controls the Northwest Passage, the shipping route that could revolutionize global trade. Canada says it's Canadian internal waters. America says it's an international strait where anyone can sail freely. In 1988, they reached a compromise. The U.S. agreed to ask Canada before sending icebreakers through the passage. Canada agreed to say yes. Both sides kept their legal positions. Problem solved, right? Wrong. Because that compromise worked when the Northwest Passage was frozen solid year-round. Now, climate change has rewritten the rules entirely. The Northwest Passage could cut shipping distances between Asia and Europe by 2,500 miles, between North America's coasts by over 4,000 miles. No Panama Canal fees, no Suez Canal choke points, no piracy risks off Somalia. Just open water through Canadian territory for longer and longer periods each summer. Whoever controls this route controls the future of global shipping. And Trump's America has made it very clear. They're not asking for permission anymore. In April 2025, President Trump signed an executive order titled Unleashing Alaska's Extraordinary Resource Potential. Hidden in that order was language asserting America's commitment to ensuring freedom of navigation and American dominance in Arctic waterways. Translation: the 1988 agreement where the U.S. asks Canada before using the Northwest Passage, it might be dead. Trump's national security strategy, released in November 2025, explicitly resurrects the Monroe Doctrine for the entire Western Hemisphere, including the Arctic. Where the document states that America cannot afford to rely on Canadian permission to access strategically vital waterways. His Secretary of State under his first term called Canada's sovereignty claim over the Northwest Passage illegitimate. Not disputed, not contested, illegitimate. And this isn't just talk. Trump has repeatedly suggested Canada should become the 51st state of the United States. Most people laughed it off as typical Trump bluster. But look at what's actually happening. 3 days ago, on January 27th, 2026, the Financial Times reported that U.S. State Department officials have met at least 3 times with leaders of the Alberta Prosperity Project, a separatist group pushing for Alberta to leave Canada. These aren't fringe activists meeting in basements. These are organized political leaders meeting with American government officials in Washington. The Alberta Prosperity Project has publicly stated they plan to request a $500 billion credit line from the U.S. Treasury to support Alberta's independence. Trump's Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, described Alberta as a natural partner for the United States. He praised the province's resource wealth and independent character. He said Alberta would be better off without Canadian federal environmental regulations blocking pipeline development. When a reporter asked if he was encouraging Alberta to separate from Canada, Bessent smiled and said the administration regularly meets with civil society groups. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith visited Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in January 2025, while every other Canadian provincial leader was criticizing Trump's threats. She refuses to denounce the separatists, calling their grievances legitimate. Billboards appeared along highways between Calgary and Edmonton showing her shaking hands with Trump, with text reading, "Join the USA," paid for by a group calling themselves Canadians for the 51st state. This is not normal diplomacy. This is deliberate destabilization. Prime Minister Mark Carney, who became Canada's leader in March 2025 after Justin Trudeau's resignation, is fighting back. But he's fighting a battle on multiple fronts against an opponent with 10 times Canada's military budget and economic leverage. At the World Economic Forum in Davos on January 22, 2026, Carney delivered a speech that sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community. Without mentioning Trump by name, Carney condemned great powers that use economic integration as a weapon against smaller nations. He declared that middle powers must unite to protect their sovereignty. He said the days of subordination disguised as partnership are over. Trump's response was immediate and hostile. He publicly attacked Carney, calling him ungrateful. He posted on social media that Canada lives because of the United States. He revoked Carney's invitation to what he calls his Board of Peace diplomatic initiative. Treasury Secretary Bessent went on Fox News, claiming Carney had aggressively walked back his Davos comments in a phone call with Trump. Carney rolled his eyes when reporters asked about this. "To be absolutely clear," he said, "and I said this to the president, I meant what I said in Davos. This is open confrontation between a superpower determined to expand its control and a middle power fighting for survival." Carney has responded by dramatically diversifying Canada's partnerships. In the past 6 months, his government has signed 12 new economic and security agreements across 4 continents. In January 2026, he visited China and announced a new strategic partnership with Beijing, including tariff reductions. He's reaching out to India, Australia, Qatar, European nations, anyone who will help reduce Canada's dependence on the United States. He's committed Canada to meeting NATO's 2% defense spending target. He's investing billions in Arctic infrastructure. But here's the cruel irony. Canada is currently helping the United States build the very icebreakers that could be used to violate Canadian sovereignty. The ICE Pact, signed with the US and Finland to jointly develop Arctic vessels, seemed smart when it was announced. Share technology, share costs, build capability together. Now, as Trump threatens Canadian territory, experts are asking whether Canada should continue helping America develop the capability to control the Northwest Passage by force. The first U.S. Arctic security cutters won't arrive until 2028 or 2029. Canada has a narrow window to act, and the pressure is building from every direction. Just weeks ago, Trump turned his attention to Greenland, threatening Denmark with tariffs unless they surrendered the territory to American control. Danish officials summoned the U.S. ambassador after reports emerged that Trump allies were compiling lists of Greenlanders sympathetic to joining the United States. Denmark, a NATO ally for over 70 years, was treated like a hostile power. Canada shares a 3,000-kilometer maritime border with Greenland in the Arctic. If America takes Greenland, Canada's Arctic becomes surrounded. The strategic implications are terrifying. Meanwhile, in the Canadian Arctic itself, the situation borders on criminal neglect. Nunavut, Canada's largest territory, has one deepwater port, completed only in 2022. No roads connect it to southern Canada, no railways, no fiber optic internet. Energy comes from diesel generators, burning fossil fuels, flown in at enormous cost. Healthcare requires flying patients thousands of miles south. The Nanisivik Naval Refueling Station, announced in 2007, still isn't fully operational. Almost 20 years to build a fuel depot. The federal government has made grand promises for decades. Arctic training centers, military bases, icebreakers, radar systems, most remain promises. The infrastructure that does exist is crumbling. Indigenous communities who have lived in the Arctic for thousands of years have been systematically abandoned. Compare this to Norway, a country with a fraction of Canada's resources, which has established robust Arctic presence with modern military installations, research stations, and infrastructure that actually works. Compare it to Russia's massive Arctic militarization. Canada looks like an amateur in a professional game, and here's what keeps defense analysts awake at night. Canada might lose the Arctic without a shot being fired. Sovereignty in international law requires more than just drawing lines on a map. It requires effective occupation. It requires demonstrating you can exercise jurisdiction over territory you claim. Canada's own Arctic foreign policy, released in December 2024, acknowledged this reality: use sovereignty or lose it. Historical and legal titles aren't enough. You must be present. The nightmare scenario isn't a Russian invasion or a Chinese landing. It's an American freedom of navigation operation through the Northwest Passage without Canadian permission. A unilateral assertion that the passage is international waters, backed by naval vessels, Canada cannot stop. Such an operation would destroy Canada's sovereignty claim overnight. Once the United States successfully challenges Canada's Arctic sovereignty, others will follow. Russian submarines, Chinese research vessels, European shipping companies. The floodgates would open. Canada would retain nominal sovereignty over Arctic land, but effective control of the waters would be lost forever. And with it, control of resources, shipping routes, and the ability to protect Indigenous communities. This isn't just Canada's problem. What happens in the Canadian Arctic affects everyone. The Arctic represents 25% of the world's undiscovered oil and gas. It contains shipping routes that will reshape global trade. It holds minerals essential for the green energy transition. Energy prices in Europe, manufacturing in Asia, climate change globally, all connected to what happens at the top of the world. So what's the solution? Canada needs to make a choice. Either invest massively in Arctic infrastructure, defense, and development right now, or accept that it will lose effective sovereignty over the North. Deep water ports in every major Arctic community, year-round military presence with modern equipment, real satellite networks providing actual internet access, roads and railways connecting territories to the south, renewable energy infrastructure, research stations, modern icebreakers, radar installations, and most importantly, genuine partnership with the Inuit and other Indigenous peoples who have lived in the Arctic for millennia. The Inuit Circumpolar Council has made it crystal clear: there is no such thing as a better colonizer. Neither American, Danish, nor Canadian control is acceptable without genuine Indigenous partnership and leadership. Any solution that doesn't center Indigenous sovereignty is doomed to fail. The price tag will be staggering, hundreds of billions of dollars over the next decade. But the cost of doing nothing is infinitely higher. Lose the Arctic, and Canada loses its identity as a northern nation. It loses trillions in resources. It loses geopolitical relevance. It becomes what Trump has already suggested: a geographic appendage of the United States. The ice is melting. The world is watching. And Canada stands at a crossroads. We're watching in real time as the post-World War II international order crumbles. Trump's America has made clear it will pursue its interests regardless of alliances, treaties, or norms. If Canada, with all its resources and democratic values, cannot maintain sovereignty over its own territory against pressure from its closest ally, what hope does international law have anywhere else? What message does it send to every other middle power, facing pressure from larger neighbors? Carney has declared that Canada will chart its own course, building partnerships with those who respect sovereignty while standing firm against those who don't. But declarations aren't enough. Canada needs ships, planes, bases, infrastructure, and most importantly, the political will to use them. Sovereignty on thin ice. The trillion-dollar confrontation over Canada's north. This isn't a distant threat. Trump attacked Carney by name days ago. American officials are meeting with Alberta separatists right now. The Northwest Passage is ice-free for longer every year. Chinese icebreakers are mapping the Arctic as we speak. The only question is whether Canada has the courage and capability to defend what's rightfully its before the window closes forever. The Arctic is melting. The clock is ticking. And the world's most powerful nation isn't asking for permission anymore. The next chapter of this story will be written in the coming months. Will Canada rise to meet this existential challenge? Or will historians look back and identify January 2026 as the moment when Canada's Arctic sovereignty began its irreversible slide into American control? The ice is thin, the stakes are trillion-dollar high, and time is running out. If you want more real economic analysis, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it. Your support helps this content grow and keeps the conversation alive.